What is going on, guys? My name is David from AquaOtter, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia chapter review. This week we are talking about chapter 310, Masters and Pupil. This chapter, I hope y'all are ready for a history lesson because we get the drops, man. We get the drops about history. We get a huge reveal. Well, I mean, for me, it's a huge reveal. I've been waiting for this for a while, but man, I'm excited. Let's hop right into it. Like I said, chapter 310, Masters and Pupil, we start. Dude, you gotta talk about Horikoshi's cover art because the man just does it different, man. He just does it different. I mean, I always love cover art in my One Piece reviews. I don't normally spend a lot of time on it because, like, whenever I just want to dive into the meat of the chapters, I kind of want to dive into the meat of the chapter here, but, like, I grew up reading comic books. I love reading comic books. You know, I ended up discovering reading manga through reading comic books, so whenever I see one of these, like, kind of comic book cover pages from Horikoshi, I love it so much. If you haven't seen the color spread cover page for this chapter, go and seek it out. It is beautiful. But getting right into it, we start off on this chapter. It is a very, very rainy night out, and we get to see some citizens who, you know, it's like thunder and lightning out, and we get to see some citizens who are screaming and yelling. They're like, "You monster!" And we get to see what they're yelling at, and it is revealed to be just a woman who has kind of a I can't remember what they're referred to in the series, but they're the type of quirks kind of like Tokoyami has, where, like, their quirks, like, physically manifest themselves and, like, change their bodies, make them look different than normal humans. And this woman is yelling out, you know, her umbrella is being blown away by the wind, and these civilians kind of have her surrounded. She's like, "No, you've got it all wrong, you know, please leave me alone. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just scared. Please stop." And one of the civilians is, you know, like, about to use his quirk on her. He's yelling like, "Yeah, right, you're just trying to get us to drop your guard and then you'll strike." And she's yelling out, "No," and the quirk is about to launch off. I don't exactly know. It's hard for me to, like, determine from the one panel that we see, like, exactly what this person's quirk is, but he's launching off like a blast. And all of a sudden, right at, like, the last second, boom, we get to see Deku. He comes to the rescue, deflects the attack. This is what his danger sense was alerting him to, and he is on the scene. So he knocks it out, and he's just kind of pleading. He's not, like, yelling at them, but he's pleading to them. He's like, "Please calm down. Like, I understand that it's a stormy night. It's got everybody on edge, but, you know, this woman is not a threat to anybody." And, you know, the civilians, they end up walking off, and they're, like, kind of yelling back at them. And he's like, well, you know, she shouldn't wander around in the dark looking like that. And so now it's just Deku and this woman alone that he just saved, and she's just kind of saying, you know, "I was slow to evacuate, you know, this town that they're in, like, it didn't experience any kind of major upheaval at first, so she just, like, hid in her home and was kind of waiting for it all to blow over, but, you know, people started getting hurt left and right, and she got scared, so she thought that she would go and take shelter at a hero school, and she just kind of, like, ran out into the night to head to a hero school, and she just says, like, I'm sorry that everything turned horrible so fast." And there's, like, this such, like, a little soft moment in this next panel that I really, really love. You see Deku, he has used Nana's quirk, Float, to actually go up and get this girl's umbrella, and he's kind of floating back down, and he's holding the umbrella up for her, and it's just, like, it's not like a huge, like, showstopper. Like, this isn't a panel that's gonna, like, linger with me the way that some other panels have lingered in the past, and, like, made, like, a significant impact. But, like, something about this panel just, like, tickles me in a certain way, and I really, really like it. And he gives her the umbrella back, and is like, "Listen, I bet that everyone else is just as scared as you are." And she says, "I wonder if it'll ever get back to normal. Like, I wonder if the world will ever return to the way it was." And he just says, "I'm going to make it so." And she says, "Huh?" And you see All Might's car is pulling up, and he just goes, "Sorry, you know, but I'd better get going." And All Might pulls up real quick and steps out of the car and walks up, you know, "Are you okay, miss?" And Izuku, like, yells back at him, like, "All Might, could you get her to a shelter? Like, I really can't afford to be hanging around anyone," because he's still, like we found out in the last chapter, Izuku is, like, terrified to stay still right now because he knows that anywhere that he is at, Shigaraki can find him. So he's like, "I don't want to put this woman in danger. Like, I have to leave." And so I love this little exchange that happens next too, because so All Might is like, hang on one second, here, take this, and he tosses Izuku a little like bento box lunch, and he's like, there's tonkatsu in there to keep your spirits up, like just make sure you're eating. Little mom All Might trying to make sure that Izuku's taken care of, and Izuku just is smiling, and he's like, thank you so much, and he goes, it'll spoil before long, so make sure that you eat up. And we now go back to the top of that big tower that we saw Izuku standing on the top of at the end of chapter 306, and he's having a conversation with Daigoro, the Black Whip predecessor, and he's saying, it's like we've slid back to the darker days, and he's like, everyone's just kind of waiting with bated breath, hoping not to stand out, like it's just back during, like it was back during the advent of the exceptional. And he says, Shigaraki, All for One, Dabi, the Nomu, the League. It's like we don't have any leads on any of them. The authorities don't even have the manpower to follow up with the escaped convicts. He's like, the investigation's just not moving. And he's like, the world's, pretty easy pickings right now for the bad guys. And Izuku is responding by saying, with All for One's quirk transplanted into Shigaraki, like he was way too strong for us to bring down, like even with Endeavor and Aizawa's help. And he says, unless he's able to draw out All for One's full power, like he's not going to be able to stop any of what's happening. And then, so this is where, up until now, like there's been a few things that I've liked about this chapter, but this, like I said at the beginning, history time. This is where the chapter, I believe, gets really, really good. So we start launching ourselves into a flashback, and we're right back to where we were when we left off with the conversation inside Izuku's mind when he was in the coma, and he was in the room with all of the predecessors. And the last thing that we saw from in that like conversation, that world, was the first user basically turning to the second and the third user, who were turned away facing the wall, and saying, now play nice, you two. And so we see this now, it's now play nice, you two. You have to cooperate with our successor. And then it says, we get the little narration box that says, inside the One for All realm before Izuku woke up. And it's continuing that conversation with the first user saying, he needs your help to unleash his full power. He's like, I implore you, my heroes. And they're both still just facing the wall, standing on either side of the door. And, they just don't say anything. And there's just absolute silence as everyone's waiting for a response. And then Daigoro is just kind of like sitting there waiting for them to respond. And then he's like, hey, kiddo, how about you catch up on some of the other quirks in the meantime? Especially Shinomori's and En's quirk. That way, you can, when you wake up, you can visualize them better. Talking about Smokescreen and Danger Sense. And, En is like, that's not really the worst idea. And so En and Shinomori end up start talking to All Might. And then I think it's the third user. I'm pretty sure the third user is the one with the bandana and like his hair pulled back. And the second user is the one that kind of looks a little bit like Bakugo. But which I have a theory about that. We'll talk about that, but we're not getting there. But so the third user, actually, while this conversation is happening, he's not speaking to Midoriya, but he talks to the first. And he says, we lived through the harshest era. He's like the height of All for One's prosperity, an era when his control spread completely unchecked. He's like, those who were under his control, didn't even realize that they were. And he's like, but our leader had misgivings about the future. He says, in order to strike back against All for One's control, he gathered up allies and he fought. And we get this close-up now of the face of the second predecessor. And he's just he's got like this 1,000-yard stare, and we see that he's got a big scar across his face. And then he starts talking, and he's like, you were there with us all. You saw it, Yoichi. And I want to keep talking, but let's just talk for a second. 310 chapters, man. And like, I know that it's been a while, or it hasn't been 310 chapters since we've known him. But like, the first time that we ever met the first user, I mean, up until now, the only hint that we've gotten of his name is that, obviously his last name is Shigaraki, because All for One's last name is Shigaraki, and they're brothers. But the first time that we met the first user was all the way back in chapter 33. Like, that long it's been. Chapter 33 that we met him, and granted, it was like a silhouette, but it's been all this time, and we finally have a name. His name is Yoichi Shigaraki, the first user of One for All, the one who started everything, All for One's brother. I don't know if anyone else is as hype about that as I am, but like, what a reveal for me personally. Like, I'm so hype. I like cannot believe we finally have his name, and I like, it doesn't really even mean anything. It's just a name. It's just a name drop. But like, dude, I've been waiting so long to like find out more specifically about this guy, and like we've been getting little hints and drops, and now we finally have his name, and it makes me so happy. But yeah, anyway, so the second user says, you know, you were there with us all, or you were there with us, you know, you saw it all, Yoichi. And he responds by saying like, yeah. And he goes, I sought to bring down your brother and extinguish so many lives in the process. And he's like, but in our battle, victory meant life and defeat meant death. And now you tell us to devote our efforts to someone who wants to save our mortal enemy. He's like, a boy holding such a ridiculous delusion, you want us to help him. He's like, and Yoichi responds by being like, a ridiculous delusion, like, that's a sad way to see it. He's like, then tell me this, why on that day, knowing full well my ties to your mortal enemy, why did you reach out to me? And dude, I love this. So we get to see this flashback because they are in the room, like the room that the One for All realm is in that room that Yoichi was trapped in. And we get to see, as he's saying this, the door, you know, and the second and the third user on either side of the door. And then the door kicks open as we see this flashback to the day that he met the two of them. The door gets kicked open by the second and the third user, and they see Yoichi sitting there. And then we see this panel of just him. Yoichi's on the floor, and the second user reaching his hand out to help. And I just, man, like, I'm just going to keep going with the chapter review because I just have so much that I want to talk about, and it's all going to have to just come out of me right at the end of the review. But so Yoichi continues by just saying, you know, our battle never could have begun if you hadn't taken me from this room on that day. He's like, besides, you know, what choice do we have now? He's like, you know, this is the only way, which, you know, that's why you've chosen to appear here in the first place. Like, if you didn't want to help, like, why are you here? And he just asks, he's like, can that boy really bring an end to all of this? And Yoichi says yes. He's like, One for All emerged from the will to resist my brother, but the moment you reached your hand out to me was when One for All was truly born. And they just say, we're now out of the flashback, but I love this panel. We already know, like Horikoshi said, he already loves drawing hands, but we just get this close-up of their hands meeting, Yoichi and the seconds, and I just we'll talk about it. And so we go into this, we're out of the flashback, and we just hear, listen up, boy. And then we see this amazing panel of Izuku standing there, and he's flanked by the spirits of all the predecessors. You know, we got Yoichi in the background, you know, En, All Might, Shinomori, Nana, Daigoro, the second and the third. And the second is talking to him, and he's like, things are bound to move more quickly from here out. And then Izuku, you know, he's got the bento open, and he just puts the tonkatsu in his mouth, and he's like, right. And then that's it. That's it for the chapter. But let's talk. Let's talk, you and I. All right. So, what a chapter. A lot of stuff happens in this chapter. And it doesn't seem like a lot of stuff happens in this chapter, but a lot of stuff really does happen in this chapter. So we kind of, starting from the beginning, you know, we get this little drop of like where things are, you know, in the, you know, where things have gone, how the case has progressed over the past 4 months, which is that it hasn't. It really hasn't. The police are overwhelmed. They can't deal with the breakouts. You know, they're trying to deal with the breakouts, but they don't have the manpower. You know, they don't know where anybody is. They haven't been able to find any of the League of Villains. None of the Nomu, Dabi, Shigaraki, All for One, none of that. There are absolutely no leads. It's been 4 months. We've got nothing. But, you know, they're still trying. And then we move into this little flashback thing, and we get all these, like, little tiny hints about, like, what happened in the past. You know, we get that reveal, which doesn't really, like, say, like, a whole lot about things, but, you know, that reveal of Yoichi's name. And then the second and the third finally coming around and basically saying, like, listen, and kind of further reinforcing this point that, like, Deku is going to be confronted with a choice. And right now, he wants to save Shigaraki, but he's going to be confronted with a choice at some point. And I don't even think it's going to be in the final confrontation. I really now, because of this chapter, think that there is going to be not a final, or there's going to be like a confrontation before the final confrontation, where Deku is going to be confronted with the choice of having to kill Shigaraki. And he's probably going to struggle a lot with that, because right now he really wants to save him. And I do believe, just because I feel like the point is that Deku's trying to become a hero who can save anybody. And if he can save Shigaraki, that will really hammer it home to us, the audience, that he can save anybody. And so I do believe that is going to happen. But I do think that because of this interaction between the second, where he's like, you want us to help this naive kid. And this is also a thing that we keep getting hammered home. We had it in the last chapter with Gran Torino basically telling Deku, like, listen, killing can also be another way of saving. But we get this idea of, like, he is so naive that he thinks that he's going to be able to save Shigaraki, and instead of just ending it, like, and that in trying to save him, like, he's actually putting people in more danger because of that. And then there's the whole interaction with, like, I really, really want to know who the leader is that the third referenced, because he just says, like, our leader. And I feel like it's important, because when he says that, leader is bolded. So it's like, who is that? Like, that's going to be a reveal down the line. Like, who is the leader of this group that got, you know, the second and the third user together to kind of combat all for one? Like, who was that first hero that was like, we need to fight back? And then that in turn ended up, you know, leading to the second and the third rescuing Yoichi, and then eventually One for All being passed down. And that story of the second, you know, getting there and knowing that this is his mortal enemy's brother and still reaching out to help him. And that line of how One for All was born, that the moment that you reached your hand out to me, like, that was where this power was truly born. And I also want to talk, because this guy, I really think that it's going to be revealed that this dude has some kind of relation to Bakugo. And I don't know, like, because he looks super similar to Bakugo. He's got that, like, spike kind of hair like Bakugo has. It seems like it might be a little bit of a darker shade, but even we see him in his hero costume, and he's got kind of like a gauntlet like Bakugo has. So, like, I really am kind of being pushed towards the path of, like, there's got to be a connection there, and I would love that. Like, I would love if he was one of Bakugo's ancestors, because that would, like, tie, you know, this whole thing that we've been going for with Deku and Bakugo together, like, really, really nicely. And yeah, God, dude, I loved this chapter. I really think that the last chapter was a bit more hype, but, like, just in terms of, like, establishing the story and the stakes, and, like, really kind of, like, going into the history now of the world, because I love worlds that are super fleshed out and have this deep, rich history. And, like, the fact that we are now we're definitely at some point going to get, like, a full flashback. At least I thoroughly believe so. I really hope so. I really, really hope so, that we get, like, this full flashback, like, mini arc, probably, like, within this coming arc, of, like, what's going on with, like, the second and the third and their whole story. Because that line about the leader, and the fact that it's bolded, like, that makes me think that there's more to that story there that, like, is going to end up being revealed to us. But yeah, super good chapter. I don't think it was as good as last chapter, but it's definitely up there. It's, like, probably the last chapter I would put, like, this much above it, like, just a little space. Like, if the last chapter was a 5 out of 5, it's like a 4.9. Like, but yeah, so those are my thoughts. Let me know in the description what you guys think about my pseudo theory. It's not even, like, really a theory. It's just something I don't have any evidence besides just, like, a feeling that, like, maybe the second user is in some way an ancestor of Bakugo, that they have some kind of relation. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Let me know in the comments what you think about the chapter. The next chapter is dropping on May 9th because Jump is on break this week because of Golden Week. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you like the video, go ahead and like it. And if you like the review and you want to see more from me, go ahead and subscribe to be notified whenever, you know, a new chapter review comes up. I also review One Piece on this channel. If you're into that, go ahead and check that out. Yeah, but until then, like I said, pretty good chapter. Thank you guys for watching so much. And I will see you guys in chapter 311 plus Ultra.